Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. Hope you're all enjoying this beautiful Friday morning. This is Karina Hill with the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association. And on behalf of the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association, we want to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Adverse Childhood Experiences with Melitta, Basa. This webinar is being made available through a collaboration of the Florida Department of Children and Families Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health and the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association. We're going to go through a few housekeeping slides. Please note that as an attendee, you are only in listen-only mode and will only be able to view your name. If you have any questions, please send them to the presenter and me by using the Q&A panel. The button to open the panel is usually located on the upper right side of your monitor. Please use the Q&A panel to send any questions you may think of as you think of them. The presenter will address your questions as time permits. Our audio is broadcast through the internet to your computer. If you experience poor computer audio, there are a few options to try on screen right now, and these options are posted in the chat panel too. If you continue to experience poor audio through your computer, try rejoining the webinar and call in using the telephone I will call in option. You must be connected to the audio of this presentation and view it on screen as well to receive a certificate of attendance. The recording and materials used in today's presentation will be available on the FADA website within 30 business days. One helpful hint is the archived video displays what looks to be an error message, but it's only a delay buffer, so just ignore it, hit play, and enjoy. To access the recording and PowerPoint, go to www.fada.org, Resource Center, Training Library. FADA produces many webinars and workshops through the support of the Florida Department of Children and Families. To help participants track credits and earn through attendance, we host an online community that provides a personalized digital journal where participants can maintain statements of credit for webinars and workshops taken through the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association. At the end of today's webinar, the web browser will direct everyone to an evaluation form on the FADA website. You will first need to register or sign in to your account to complete the evaluation. Information you provide FADA as part of registering remains confidential. Statements of credit will be posted within 5 business days after the evaluation closes in individual professional development journals for persons completing the evaluation and attending the full webinar. Completing the evaluation is necessary to receive CE credits or to access your statement of credit. Do note that the evaluation will close at midnight on Tuesday, March 10th. 1 to 2 continuing education credits are available for participating in today's webinar for persons licensed through the Board of Nursing, the Board of Clinical Social Work, Marriage and Family Therapy, and Mental Health Counseling, and for persons credentialed through the Florida Certification Board. If you are a licensed healthcare practitioner, be sure to include your Florida license number for reporting to CE Broker when you register with our site for the first time. If you are certified with the Florida Certification Board or licensed outside of the state of Florida, you do not need to provide your certification number when you register with our site. Know, please, that WebEx monitors arrival and departure of attendees and provides a report upon completion of the event. We are not permitted to provide contact hours or a certificate of attendance if you do not attend the entire webinar, and we are not permitted to provide partial credit. And now I would like to introduce Melitta Basa. She is the Director of Clinical Services at Greenhouse Treatment Center in Grand Prairie, Texas. She has a strong background working in addiction, behavioral health, and family and marriage therapy. In her role, she is responsible for more than a dozen clinicians as well as all clinician decisions across disciplines while maintaining adherence to standards set by CARF International. And now I would like to welcome Melitta, and I will turn the presentation over to you, Melitta.
All right, good morning. Hello, everyone. I'm just trying to move this. Karina, if you could help me out to get to the first slide, I'm unable to do that.
You should be able to get on now. Let's see.
All right, here we go. All right, so we're going to be talking about adverse childhood experiences and best practices. So the objectives we're going to address today are to examine the nature of adverse childhood experiences examine the biochemical, psychological, and neurological effects of traumatic stress in childhood, examine the clinical research that supports the imperative factors that influence the result of childhood stress, and analyze the clinical application of various theoretical treatment models. All right, so before we start, I would like to do an activity. We're going to have a poll, and Karina's going to have that up in the Q&A section if you just look at the bottom there. And so it's going to ask you, what percentage of the population do you believe adverse childhood experiences impact? So A, 20 to 30%, B, 40 to 50%, C, 60 to 70%, D, 70 to 80, or E, 80 to 90. So go ahead and submit those. All right, so let's take a look to see what we guessed on. And whenever I can see, there we go. Okay, so it looks like most people thought, say, 70 to 80%. At about 23% of you thought that. So we'll go ahead and see. We'll talk about that a little bit further. So that might be a good guess. All right. So we're going to do an activity. And the activity is going to be identifying a person who you're really close to. So I want you to think of the least healthy individual that you're close to. And when you have this person in mind, I want you to just go ahead and raise your hand. And then I'm going to ask 3 different questions. And if any of the questions apply to you or this person, I want you to just go ahead and put your hand down. So again, we're identifying the person who we're really close to, who is the least healthy individual in their life. All right, so the first question is, your person has experienced a separation or divorce of a parent. So if that applies to your person, go ahead and put your hand down. If not, keep it up. Your person has experienced some sort of food, transportation, or financial insecurity at some point in their life. Your person grew up with a family member who had a mental health illness or substance abuse problem. Okay, so if your hand was down with any of those 3 questions, if those apply to your person, we actually capture 70 to 80% of individuals with ACEs with just those 3 questions. And ACEs are incredibly common. About 67% of individuals experience at least one adverse childhood experience. So we're going to do the next poll question. And there's 2 questions on this one. So I just kind of want to know if your person fell into that 70 to 80%. And have you ever linked poor health with any of these categories? So take a minute and answer those. And the categories we're referring to are those 3 questions that I asked about. All right, and let's see what you guys rated. Okay, so it sounds like 50% did apply to their person. Okay. So I guess that goes back to exactly what the question was intended to do. And says, have you ever, okay, so about 46% of you have thought that maybe these link together. All right, good. All right, so we're going to go into talking about ACEs study and the mechanisms that ACEs can lead to. The first study actually occurred in the mid-90s. The study originated from Dr. Folletti, who was actually studying morbid obese cases. In 1980, Dr. Folletti started a weight loss clinic for the Kaiser Permanente members as they suffered many health problems. This included diabetes and heart attacks that were exacerbated by their weight. And in 1985, Dr. Vincent Folletti was mystified why 55% of the 1,500 people that were enrolled in the weight loss clinic every year dropped out. And these were individuals who were actually losing weight. So he was mystified by, these people who were dropping out of the study that were actually losing weight from that. So he decided he wanted to ask those who dropped out, why that was. So he interviewed about 286 individuals. And he found that none of the participants were born fat. All were born with normal birth weight and some even below. And second was that people who were severely overweight didn't gain 10 to 20 pounds over a year, over several years. He actually found that when they gained weight, they did so abruptly and then stabilized. If any weight was lost, they almost regained it in weeks and months. So by accident, he actually found what came to be the ACEs study. He was involved with another study that asked a variety of questions, one being, how much did you weigh when you were first sexually active? A woman replied, 40 pounds. He then discovered this woman was actually identifying childhood abuse with her father. So Dr. Folletti was introduced to Dr. Robert Anda, who was working for the CDC, and he was studying depression and hopelessness and how they affected heart disease. And since the 1960s, researchers have known about this behavior and diseases that are strongly linked. Dr. Anda researched 10 different factors that measure childhood abuse in the literature that he found. And the factors included physical, verbal, and sexual abuse, physical and emotional neglect, parents who were affected by addiction, mental health illness, maybe went to prison, a mother being abused, and losing a parent from either abandonment or divorce. Dr. Folletti and Dr. Anda, along with dozens of other researchers, launched their first study on ACEs and then published their findings in 1998. The ACEs study is the largest on this topic and includes 17,000 individuals over a 10-year lifespan. They came to the conclusion that ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences, were major determinants of health and social well-being. 87 of those who were studied had at least more than one ACE. And I'm going to go to here. Childhood experiences are powerful determinants of who we become as adults. We know from these studies it impacts our emotional problems, health risk problems, serious social problems, adult disease and disability, high health and mental health costs, and poor life expectancy. ACEs and their associated harms are preventable, so that's the good news. Creating and sustaining a safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments for all children and families can prevent ACEs and help all children reach their full health and life potential. In this diagram here, we see from conception to death, the more of these events that we have, the higher risk and poor life expectancy an individual has. We see here on the bottom, historical trauma, and that would be generational. So even, before conception, the trauma that our family holds, and going all the way up to health risk behaviors, social cognitive impairments, disrupted neurodevelopment, and adverse childhood experiences. And these are exactly what we're going to be looking at today and what they can lead to. All right, so we're going to take the ACEs test ourselves. So this is the test that they developed that help us identify our ACEs score. So I'm going to read it out loud. If you have a pen and paper on you, just take a minute and go get one if you don't, and we'll go through the test together. Okay, so I'm going to read the questions out loud for you. If the answer is yes, go ahead and score a 1. And if it's no, we put a 0. All right. So question number 1 is, before you were 18, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? So if this is a yes, we put a 1. If it's a no, we put a 0. All right, number 2, before you were 18, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? Before you were 18, did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you, or have you touch their body in a sexual way or attempt to, or actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Number 4, before you were 18, did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Before you were 18, this is number 5, before you were 18, did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you, or were your parents too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to a doctor if you needed it? Number 6, before you were 18, were your parents ever separated or divorced? Number 7, before you were 18, was a parent often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at him or her, or sometimes often or very often kicked, beaten, hit with fist, or hit with something so hard, or ever repeatedly hit over at least a few minutes or threatened with a gun or knife by a domestic partner? Before you were 18, did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic or used street drugs? Number 9, before you were 18, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? Number 10, before you were 18, did a household member go to prison? So what we would do is add up our ACEs score. So every question that was a 1, you add those up, and that would be your ACEs score. So we're going to do a polling question. I just kind of want to see where you guys are at. And should be 3 questions there. So go ahead and take your time on answering those. Okay, so we'll close the poll now and see what you guys scored. Okay, so it looks like not many were surprised by their ACEs score. That's good. That means you have a lot of insight. And it looks like a lot of you feel that this would, your clients would probably score more than a 4. I always think it's good for us to provide this when appropriate for our clients, just kind of see where they're at and what kind of, history they had growing up. But it's also good for us to know this ourselves. I remember the first time I, heard about ACEs and I took the test, I was pretty surprised by, the score that I received, because we don't think some things impact us in our life. And I think that sometimes our clients think that as well. So it's always good to just get an insight of where they're at and work through that with them. We'll talk about that a little bit further. All right, so what do the ACEs test and the scores mean? So 7 out of 10 causes of death in the mid-90s. We know there's a 20-year difference in life expectancy, and a score of 4 or more indicates 2 times more likely to develop Hep C, COPD, and other diseases, 4 times more likely to become depressed, and 12 times more likely to attempt to take his or her own life, which is pretty incredible that we can see these things from just that test. So very important. And we're going to watch a quick TED talk in the future that goes a little bit further into this. All right, so since the ACEs study, 18 states have done their own ACEs surveys with similar surveys, just like the one we just took not too long ago. In 2011, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris spoke at the Leadership Exchange meeting. It was called Trauma Across the Lifespan, What Do We Know? And the meeting included individuals from SAMHSA and a panel of national experts from the US and Canada. SAMHSA is the leader of ACEs and is the first to have a national policy in 2011, Make It So. Since 2012, major development and research occurred. So that included the Shankoff in 2016, the Center for Developing Child, a Harvard University study, and we'll talk about that a little bit further when we go into the research. Pediatricians are now joining the movement. Agencies are now focusing on mothers' and babies' health. Trauma-informed is now being part of suicide prevention. And culturally safe and effective for communities for Indigenous populations. In 2014, SAMHSA is working on consistency and definitions and language around trauma and trauma-informed approaches. Several countries now utilize assessment tools for communities and practitioners. And people who experience trauma seek help in a variety of different settings. Dr. Gaber was focusing on how to treat abused individuals rather than treating them like criminals. And I love his quote. He says, to treat addiction, treat trauma. And I think that's so true. U.S. schools are now adopting ACEs and working towards being a trauma-informed schools. Trauma-informed work with veterans and people who experience trauma are now, we talked about that, now seeking in different settings, which, not just in therapeutic offices, but we're looking, as we talked about, practitioners are now utilizing it, schools, and that's huge. So we're now going to go into our TED Talk, and this is Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. And we'll pull up that video for you so you don't have to go into that link.
In the mid-90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or packaging chemical. It's childhood
Okay. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that TED Talk. That's one of my favorite on ACEs. And I have a question here from someone that I want to address. So they said, taking the ACEs test could create trauma for revisiting childhood events, and can you address how to deal with that? Certainly, the ACEs test can bring up some triggers for our past trauma, but we want to use our clinical judgment when we, give that test. If you're going to utilize that survey, you're going to make sure, your client is ready. Is this clinically appropriate at this time of their treatment to provide this test? And what is the setting, that the client is in? Are you an outpatient? If you're, seeing clients individually in outpatient, I think that there is a higher risk there as opposed to being in a treatment center with a client. So in our treatment center, we actually have this as one of our classes, our core classes for psychoeducation, and all the clients take the ACEs. It's actually module 1. The reason why we do that is we want them to become aware of their ACEs, and then we move into how are we going to treat it. So at that time, when they get this awareness, they have that decision, am I going to begin to work on this as opposed to continuing to ignore any issues that maybe led us to where we're at today. But in outpatient setting, you don't maybe see them weekly, biweekly, so you really have to use your best clinical judgment because they're going home at the end of the day, where in a treatment center, they're surrounded 24/7 with clinicians and nurses and TAs or tech staff. So, you want to be making sure that, your client is ready and what is the circumstance, and use your best judgment with that. So hopefully that answered that question. Okay, so next are different types of screenings. So in our TED Talk, she talks about, the ACEs questionnaire. So that's one of the questionnaires that you can utilize. Other screenings have been utilized as well in different settings. And all these can be redeemed at that link below. Hopefully you can see it. I can't see it because I have all these other buttons, but hopefully you can. If you can't, you can go ahead and let me know, and I'll find that for you. Okay, the other screenings include Youth Wellness Adverse Childhood Experience Questionnaire, and then there's a user guide for that too. The ACEs Family Health History and Health Appraisal Questionnaire, Parental ACEs Screening Tool, Resilience Questionnaire, Parental Screening Questionnaire, A Safe Environment for Every Kid, and Pediatric Intake Form. And there's also the Child Stress Disorders Checklist. Again, hopefully you can see that link below and you can find those there. And then I see a question here, what is the incarceration rate for those who have a score higher than 4? And I don't know specifically on that rate, so I do apologize for that, but I'm sure that in the ACEs studies nowadays, that is, out there. I'm sure they've studied that, the rate of incarceration for a score of 4 or more. Okay. So here, when dealing with trauma, it's helpful to use multidisciplinary teams. So that's exactly what Dr. Harris was talking about, layers of players that provide for a more integrated model for treatment. So we're looking at anywhere, like she talked about, from care coordination, therapy for the child and also the family, education. Those are all part of multidisciplinary teams. Okay, so we're going to do a poll real quick. And so the question should show up there, and go ahead and identify the frequency that you feel like you practice self-care. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to look at the Q&As, make sure I'm addressing them. Okay, so we'll close the poll. Okay, so 26% was the highest, and that was for D weekly. Good. So I'm glad it wasn't A, never. That would be not good. So yeah, you want to do self-care, definitely minimal weekly, if not daily. So when providing ACEs and trauma-informed care training, we want to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. I'm going to go back to slide, this slide here. We want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. The ACA, American Counselors Association Code of Ethics, states counselors engage in self-care activities to maintain and promote their own emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual well-being to best meet their professional responsibilities. We really have to take care of ourselves, especially when we're dealing with trauma. So dealing with individuals with trauma can lead to feeling fatigued, emotionally drained, and mentally preoccupied. This can lead to impacting areas of our professional and personal life. So then we risk burnout or compassion fatigue. Then we can develop some stress-related symptoms and even develop secondary traumatic stress. So it's very important to make sure that we are engaging self-care for our mind and body, so both mind and body. And we have to know what our self-care is, what makes us feel best, and making time weekly, if not daily. That might require us putting reminders on our calendar, implementing, just something very quick in our daily routine, and making sure that we are also, consulting with colleagues. That also helps a lot too. Consulting with colleagues can really help us process some of this stuff and not keep it in and hold on to it. We want to be able to process it. That's exactly what we tell our clients. We also want to take our own advice. And so there was a question here that said, is there research regarding consideration of childhood exposure to medical trauma as another potential adverse childhood experience? And I don't know if there's any research on that currently, but I would assume that definitely plays an impact. And then there's another, sounds like disorder. Okay. We will go into the neurological effects and why this is important to understand. Okay, so the childhood years from prenatal period to late adolescence are our building block years. This sets us up for a stage for adult relationships, behaviors, health, and social outcomes. ACEs and associated conditions such as living in under-resourced or racially segregated neighborhoods, frequently moving, experiencing food insecurity and other instability can cause toxic stress. This causes changes to the brain from toxic stress that can affect things such as attention, impulse behavior, decision-making, learning, emotion, and response to stress. These children are at risk, increased risk for becoming involved in crime and violence, using alcohol or drugs, engaging in other health risk behaviors, and developing diseases, illnesses, and mental health challenges over a lifetime puts them at that greater risk. Children growing up with toxic stress may have difficulty forming health and stable relationships. They may also have unstable work histories as adults, struggle with finances, family, jobs, and depression throughout life, the effects of which can be passed to their own children. So if you remember that diagram from the beginning, the triangle one, the pyramid, at the very bottom, it says history of trauma, right? All right, so trauma and the brain. In the 1960s, Paul MacLean identified 3 developmental components of the brain. And he suggested that the brain is designed in a hierarchy from evolution, designed for survival and progresses to higher functioning. So I don't know if anyone has seen the Dan Siegel's hand anatomy of the brain, but basically if you were to make a fist, but with your thumb tucked under your 4 fingers, that's the brain anatomy. So if you're doing that, you can see a good visual aid of what our reptilian brain would look like. So the reptilian or primal brain, also basal ganglia, is located at the brain stem. So that would be kind of where your wrist would be. So if you're doing that brain anatomy with your hand, so that's going to be your wrist. And this oversees tasks such as, something that's crucial for physical survival, regulation of the body, sleep-wake cycle, breathing and heartbeat, temperature regulation, and our automatic muscle movements. This is the first part of the brain, like I said, that develops. The paleomammalian or the limbic part of the brain, so if you have your hand still in that fist, it would be where your thumb, is tucked in there. And that is known as our emotional brain. So our amygdala, our hypothalamus, our hippocampus, those are all located in the paleomammalian part of our brain. And this houses primarily motion and simple memory function. It also coordinates and refines movement. This is where that adrenal axis system gets triggered. In the video from the TED Talk, she talks about this, our HPA axis, our hypothalamic and pituitary adrenal system. So this works together to send signals to the parasympathetic nervous system that communicates with the adrenal gland and internal organs that help the body regulate and prepares the body to defend itself. After an event occurs that might be traumatic for an individual, the stress levels can still be activated and can take time to stabilize. This can actually occur up to 2 weeks after an event. The stress hormones can continually be activated and re-experience symptoms. So this impacts the sensitivity to symptoms and triggers. So the limbic system is really geared towards controlling emotions. The inclusions of the hippocampus shows importance with memory and emotion. So memories can stir up emotions, and emotions may facilitate a memory. All right, and then we're going to go to the neomammalian part of the brain. So if your hand is still in that fist, it would be where your index finger would be. So that is also known as the neocortex, and that's responsible for our language, including speech and writing, handles problem solving, memory, and planning for the future, controls voluntary movement, processing sensory information, also known as, where our executive brain is, our control center. And this includes our prefrontal cortex, our prefrontal lobes, dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, which is our working memory, and then the orbital prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that focuses on social, affect regulator, empathy, attachment, warmth, and they have the connections with the limbic area. So, the prefrontal cortex is very important when we are making decisions, so understanding consequences. So, when we're thinking about when the brain is developing, we know that the brain fully develops around age 25. So think about adverse childhood experiences, and as the brain's developing, how that can really, really impact the way it functions and the ability to process information. So I think that's kind of why we see a lot more, addiction is probably, well, we know that that's one big thing that we talk about, but we know in addiction, the prefrontal cortex is kind of offline. And when they come into treatment, it really takes about 45 days for the brain to really start sending signals to the prefrontal cortex. So that's why we see a lot of that impulse behavior, a lot of trying to leave treatment early, inability to really control any, outbursts. So we see a lot of those things in early treatment, early recovery. So we know that trauma impacts these parts of the brain, and when the limbic system is constantly activated, it becomes maladaptive rather than adaptive. So there's different categories of high stress, but chronic stress can build up cortisol, which has long-term effects. Cortisol is believed to be to create a domino effect that hardwires pathways between the hippocampus and the amygdala that causes the brain to be in constant state of fight or flight rather than filtering, like I said, to the prefrontal cortex part of the brain. So it's really important to remember as we go forward. And trauma in the body, we know that trauma is held in our body about 60 to 70%. So when we think about the brain and how it sends signals, through the parasympathetic nervous system throughout the body to our different organs. So that's exactly how we hold trauma in the brain. And suppressed positive emotions, curiosity, joy, etc. So that's what it suppresses when we're holding our trauma in our body. So as clinicians, we're really trying to move towards identifying the window of tolerance and self-rescue, really practicing mind and body integration, and interpersonal, developing those interpersonal relationships with our clients too. So these are just some things that we'll go over as we get into practices. So we'll look at the coherent story versus a detailed narrative, titration and pendulation types of treatment, identifying and making sure that we have a good platform for clients feeling safe, relaxed, and calm, looking at felt safety versus real safety, perceived threat versus real threat, looking at how to move towards dual awareness, moving from a tense body to a relaxed body, identifying the arousal fear continuum, and looking at dissociation, hypoarousal, and moving more towards calmness. And we want them to move in the optimum level of functioning. All right, so on the bottom of this one, it says big T, small t, but I'm going to move to the next slide. So we know that big T would be considered so like one event, some big events such as a loss maybe of a loved one, where small t would be more of a smaller event such as loss of a relationship, maybe a job, that type of thing. So stress versus trauma, according to the APA, which is American Psychological Association, stress is a pattern of specific and non-specific responses, and that disturbs the equilibrium and our ability to cope. So trauma events are always stressful, but stress doesn't always mean trauma. And stress isn't always harmful, where trauma nearly always is. And the different types of trauma, there's type 1 and type 2. And type 1 would be a single event and type 2 would be ongoing. So if we're thinking back to our ACEs, many of those are more ongoing, so a type 2 trauma. And there's prenatal trauma and early life trauma. All right, so we are at our research slide. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, and when we come back, I'll work on looking at some of these questions and answering more.
Okay, so if everybody can be back at 11:07, that would be great. Thank you. Hello, I want to welcome everyone back. And Melitta, you really shared a lot of great information. I was wondering if we could answer a couple of questions that I see on the board.
Yep, so I see one question here that said, is there a training or a certification for the ACEs? No, there is not. Of course, you want to read of how to, whatever scale you're going to use, you want to make sure that you're reading about that and how to administer it. But no, for the one that we did earlier, there is not. And then I see a lot of questions on slides. I don't know if you want to review that with them.
Yeah, we'll have the presentation, PowerPoint, and links available on our site. We did have a question that what is the incarceration rate for those who score over a 4? I don't know if you were able to answer that one yet.
No, so I had let him know I did not know the specific rate, but it looks like Robert had posted an article. So if you go in the Q&A section there, Robert had posted that article if you want to check that out further. So thank you, Robert, for doing that and looking that up for us. Do you see any other questions that I didn't get to?
Is there research regarding consideration of childhood exposure to medical trauma, hospitalizations, exposure to painful long-term medical procedures?
Yep, so we talked about that one earlier too.
Okay.
That's the only ones I see. Okay, so if you see any more, just let me know. I'm gonna keep going. All right, so we're gonna go into the research part of this. So some of those research were the Shankoff that we talked about earlier, and those slides that talked about, since the ACEs study. We're going to talk about some of those in this, and I think they're pretty fascinating. The Marmot Review in 2011 is one of the researchers that did the developing child that we looked at from the Harvard study that we spoke about earlier. And this discusses new research on plasticity and critical periods in development. And Karina, I think your microphone is still on.
Okay, sorry.
No worries. So they looked at, like I said, the plasticity and the critical periods in developing, increasing the understanding of how gene environment interacts with affects of variation in stress and resilience. So they suggested 4 shifts in thinking about policy and practice, which is looking at early experience and the effect that they have on lifelong health, not just learning, healthy brain development that requires protection from toxic stress, achieving breakthrough outcomes for young children facing adversity that require supporting adults who care for them, and then more effective interventions that are needed in prenatal period and the first years after birth. So they proposed 6 high-level policy objectives. The first one was give every child the best start in life. 2 was to enable all children, young people, and adults to maximize their capabilities and have control over their lives. 3, create fair employment and good work for all. 4, ensure a healthy standard of living for all. 5, create and develop healthy and sustainable places and communities. And 6, strengthen the role and impact of ill health prevention. We know that early adversity has long-lasting impacts on traumatic brain, depression, anxiety, PTSD, so our mental health, the maternal health, infectious diseases, chronic disease, risky behaviors, and opportunity. So the Marmot Review really looked at how it related to ACEs and health. So their study really looked at how we can develop that equal part for an individual who maybe experienced ACEs, so giving them that best chance. Okay. So our next study is the Shankoff 2016 for the developing child. Research identified 5 numbers to remember in early childhood development, which are pretty incredible. The first one being 700 new neuron connections are made per second. At 8 months is an age at which disparities in vocabulary begin to appear. 90 to 100% chance of developmental delays when children experience 6 to 7 risk factors. 3 to 1 odds of adult heart disease after 7 to 8 adverse childhood experiences. And then a $4 to $9 in returns for every dollar invested in early childhood programs. So that's huge and pretty incredible. Look at the National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors. So they really moved from restraints and seclusions to offering alternatives that were really trauma-informed. They provided site staff training and technical support and implemented trauma-informed, strength-based approaches to prevent evasive interventions. The Federal Mental Health Block Grant Program had goals to promote an understanding of the impact of trauma and need for trauma-informed care. So that looked at clinical protocols and programs that were designed that supported recovery and enhancing resilience over a lifespan. And then the National Center for Trauma-Informed Care offered consultations and technical assistance, education, outreach, and resources to support a broad range of services. And the National Child Traumatic Stress Initiative is part of SAMHSA and worked to improve treatment and services for children, adolescents, and families who experience traumatic events. 2000 Congress recognizes serious mental health impact of traumatic events on children, adolescents, families, and authorizes the National Child Traumatic Stress Initiative as part of the Children's Health Act. They focused on evidence-based interventions, collaborations with systems of care, successful education and training approaches, data collection and evolution activities. Education and awareness raising with policymakers regarding trauma, resilience, and recovery. Product development for professionals, policymakers, families, youth, and public. And partners with youth, families, and other consumers. The program began in 2000, and more than 200 grants were awarded. In 2014, they provided the evidence-based treatment to more than 41,000 people. They provided training and assessment and treatment of traumatic stress to more than 202,000 people that included the mental health professionals, providers, consumers, and public health. Trauma-informed screening and assessment that they utilized. The first one is the TAP, so we'll go over what that is, and that is Trauma Assessment Pathway. That's what TAP stands for. It's developed by Chadwick Center for Children and Families in 2009. They had the funding from SAMHSA. It was designed for ages birth to 18 who have experienced any type of trauma. It was designed to gain in-depth understanding of child development level, the traumatic experience, and the child's family, community, and cultural systems. And CANS is Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths. This is a trauma comprehensive version. It's pretty flexible, multi-purpose tool. It can be utilized in different capacities depending on the needs of the child servicing system. The methodology is intended to gather information on a range of domains relevant to the functioning of the child in the caregiving system. So looking at trauma experiences, traumatic stress symptoms, emotional behavioral needs, risk needs, life domain functioning strengths, and caregivers' needs and strengths as well. The transactional model in 1994, they looked at, this was designed to look at the understanding of effects of child abuse and associated events on the presentation of symptoms. They examined factors related to the abuse of the child, as well as those associated in the investigation, and related events that may occur subsequent to and due to investigation. So that could be, placement outside the home, court hearings. They looked at age, sex, and personality factors are identified as variables, and then social support as well is important. Model recognizes previous coping styles and cognitive schemas, so understanding their world and events around them. And we looked at a lot of self-talk strategies and symptom maintenance. And that can be done individually or collectively. Okay. And so this study in 2013 is the Trauma-Informed Primary Care for Women's Health Issues. They looked at how ACEs scores impacted long-term health. They developed trauma-informed or primary care for women living with HIV. They had 27 leading policymakers, trauma experts, and advocates from government to develop the frameworks for this. And they define trauma broadly, addressing both recent and lifelong trauma, and focused on provider support and well-being. So the 4 components they looked at is environmental, screening, response, and foundation. All right, so practical application. We're going to go to the SAMHSA's 6 key principles of trauma-informed approach. And these, you guys are probably pretty familiar with these. The first one being safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural, historical, and gender issues. All right, known trauma-specific interventions include addiction and trauma recovery integration model, the essence of being real, risking connection, sanctuary model, seeking safety is pretty popular, and especially in treatment centers, trauma, addiction, mental health and recovery, trauma affect regulation, guide for education and therapy, trauma recovery and empowerment model. So you can find those at the link below, or you can just go to the SAMHSA website and search that. That's where I found those. Okay. Early childhood interventions, also known as ECI. Okay, so there's different types of interventions that include primary, secondary, and tertiary. So we want to look at each of these, and let me look at here. Primary prevention, stop ACEs from happening, absolutely. And that's how we do this, is through these 3 interventions. Examples include home visits for families with newborns, prenatal or parenting training programs, as well as prenatal programs too. So anyone experiencing trauma before, having a child, so helping them get the resources that they need, family wellness, and social development and economic opportunity. So I just want to touch base on back to the ECI interventions. So primary would be so openly accessible, where their participation is driven by users. So that'd be programs like Triple P, Community for Children's. Those are primary level interventions. Secondary level interventions would be programs that are really targeted towards families, such as Pathways to Prevention. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but those would be the type of interventions. And tertiary programs are really targeted towards families to prevent further development problems. And they're really designed for families to identify that would be, child protective services, things like that. Those would be that type of level. Okay. And here again, secondary prevention, looking at risk and offering treatment to increase resilience. And then tertiary prevention would be treating the final condition that emerges. So chronic diseases or behavioral health groups, treatment for mental health and substance abuse disorders. And economic stress impacts that ACEs have. We look at the HIAP. This is a WHO concept, and the key messages that they focus on that impacts the economic stress is looking at how childhood factors impact different areas of the developing individual. So that looked at health being long before illness, where we live, learn, work, and play. Causes of health and well-being lie outside health, formed socially and economically. They highlight connections and interactions between health, other sectors, and how collectively they contribute to better health outcomes. Addressing health inequalities highlights factors that impact health and well-being beyond the reach of health services and policies. And they believe in a win-win, so full circle, meaning that when we address health more, we produce a more effective government. In return, a more effective government means improved health for all. All right. So here we look at strengthening the economic supports to families, change social norms to support parents in positive parenting, provide quality care and education early in life, enhance parenting skills to promote healthy child development. So that would be exactly what childhood interventions that we talked about before, the level 1. Intervene to lessen harms and prevent future risks. So early childhood interventions continued. Health begins long before, like we said, where we learn, work, and play. So we already discussed this. This is exactly what the HIAP talked about. Again, causes of health and well-being they looked at, highlighting connections and interactions between health and other sectors, addressing the inequalities, highlighting those factors that impact health and well-being, and looking at, when we help individuals' health, we actually become more effective government. Okay, so providing ACEs and providing the, ACEs and utilizing the different surveys that we talked about earlier, whether that's giving the ACEs to the child or the family as a whole. And then once we understand where they're at, we can provide wraparound services. So that's that multidisciplinary team. Providing education is huge, and providing therapy for all family members to promote reduction of an unsafe environment. These are different evidence-based practices that can be utilized Again, that link below, if you're able to access that, will bring you to where you can find these. So the first one there is the adaptive dialectic behavioral therapy for special populations, and that really targeted males and females from ages 8 to 12. So this is youth experiencing a wide range of traumas. Alternatives for families, a cognitive behavioral approach, so can be utilized for school-age children and youth experiencing a wide range of trauma. And that can be used individually or the family as a whole. Assessment-based treatment for traumatized children, trauma assessment pathway. And that is used from birth to 18 for males and females for children who have experienced a wide range of traumas. And that can be used individually, family, or systematically. Attachment and biobehavioral catch-up, so ABC, from birth to 24 months. It can be used for males or females, and with really targeted low-income families who have experienced neglect, abuse, domestic violence, and placement instability. And that can be used, again, individually or with the family. The triphasic model, go ahead. Hello? I can kind of hear someone, but I am not sure if you're asking a question or if that's just background noise.
Melitta, I'm not sure because I have my mic off, so everyone should be muted.
Okay, no worries. I'll just keep going then. All right, the triphasic model looks at safety and stabilization, remembering and mourning trauma memory, and reprocessing and reconnection. The core competencies of triphasic model looks at empowerment and resilience structure. Active ingredients include therapeutic, relationship, collaborative, hope, safety, calming presence, psychoeducation, self-regulation, relaxation, integration, and reprocessing coherent story.
Let's take a minute break so we can figure out the technical.
Okay, no worries.
If you want to try to resume, hopefully we fixed the issues. If anyone has their mic on, if you could please make sure you put it on mute besides Melitta. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just looking and scrolling through some of the questions while we were waiting. So someone asked where we can obtain more information on medical exposure aspect. Absolutely. You can always go to the cdc.gov, and they always have a lot of information on that up to date. Is there a specific diagnosis for someone with a score of 4 or more? No, there's not a specific diagnosis, just higher risks of developing mental health, diseases like we discussed, and life expectancy as well. And then I will resume and then attend to more questions afterwards. All right, so here we are at the triphasic model as we were discussing. In this slide, I'll just go back real quick. The safety and stabilization, remembering and mourning. So that's reprocessing and then getting into reconnection. These are important aspects of that. So empowerment and resilience structure. Active ingredients include therapeutic relationship, hope, safety, having a calming presence, providing psychoeducation, helping with self-regulation, relaxation, moving towards desensitization, integration, and reprocessing from a coherent story. We always want to look at resilience and kind of strive towards that. There are core competencies for the treating clinician. So we'll review these. So identifying and utilizing active ingredients that we just discussed. Develop and enhance the therapeutic relationship and positive expectancy. Teach clients that the role that perceived threat and automatic nervous system plays in development and continuation of PTSD symptoms. Achieve, maintain, and teach relaxation skills and self-regulation skills. Understand causes, symptoms, and treatment of post-traumatic stress to provide comprehensive psychoeducation to clients. Assess symptoms to make proper diagnoses. Ability to help trauma survivors achieve good enough safety and stabilization. Assist clients in building resilience and protective factors. Engagement of self-care for the treating clinician. Treating clinician to engage in supervision with peers or colleagues. And therapists are agents of hope. Clients are coming into our offices. This is probably the last resort. They more than likely have held this in for a while. So we are their agents of hope. So it's very important for us to provide empathy and compassion, know where that sense of vulnerability is, making sure we're in a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset, a training mindset, a trusting mindset. And have the power of intention. What are we going into our sessions with? What intention are we setting out there? And what intention does our clients have in coming into our offices too? The essence of listening plays a big factor. That we listen with our eyes, our ears, our heart, and the selfless act of undivided attention into one holistic character, which is our clients. So we're going to go through 5 different phases. And these are the phases of which, when you're working with your clients that are coming into your offices that you really want to work towards. Phase 1 is always building rapport. If we don't have rapport, we don't have that connection with our clients, the likelihood of us being able to assist them is slim to none. We did a research at the treatment center I worked at, and we found that connection is one of the most important factors and determinants of clients staying in treatment. So connection early on and having that, rapport built on day 1 actually helps clients, stay in treatment, but also, when they're wanting to leave treatment, if they have that connection with someone. And I think that really applies here. And if you're doing outpatient practices, that you got to have that rapport for your client to keep coming back, right? And so we want to build that. So assessments may or may not be addressing trauma at this time, especially when it's early on. We want them to come back, so that will impact our return rate. If we go into that ACEs survey that we did earlier, and I think someone had asked about that too, actually re-trigger them and bring up some trauma. If it's early on and, the getting to know you stages, they're probably not going to come back. So we want to make sure that when we're providing these assessments and surveys, that it's the appropriate time for that. You want to first build that rapport. We want to work on noticing symptoms and body implementing the mindfulness. So this is what we're helping our clients do. So once we've built our rapport, we're working towards awareness skills, so helping them do that. One way we can do that is teach them how to rate symptoms. So I usually do a scale from 0 to 10, with 10 being the most intense and 0 being none at all. Intensity is not good or bad, so I always let them know, the example is, we can rate depression. If we're very, very depressed, might be a 10, but if we're very, very happy, that also might be a 10 as well. So we're not associating 10 with bad, but rather the intensity of that. So getting them to rate that might be a daily thing that they might have to do, that you might give as homework for them. Might start off with maybe just doing it in sessions, but getting them to create that awareness of where they're at would be a good thing to start implementing daily, and keeping a journal of that, because then we're going to be able to identify that window of tolerance. So once they start becoming aware of their symptoms, we can say, at what rating is the symptom too much? As if we're rating anxiety at a 5, when it gets to a 6, it might be too much or unbearable for that individual. And then we can get to knowing, where that might change. What is triggering that change? And what does it look like when it's a lower symptom versus a higher symptom? So really getting them in tune with their body, the sensations that they feel when this is occurring, and then emphasizing the practice of this. So before we go into phase 2 for resourcing, I want us to just practice rating any symptoms that you might have right now. So I like to do this activity with my clients and just say, rate any symptoms that you may have on a scale of 1 to 10. So I'll give you a few moments to do that. Okay, and so hopefully you rated on that scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the most intense. And we're just going to think about what contributes to that symptom. So how do you know that rating is that rating? So go ahead and list anything that you might feel emotionally, physically, cognitively. So what factors contribute to that rating? Okay. So we're going to go into a breathing activity. So I want you to just kind of keep your ratings right next to you. Put your pen aside, put your paper aside. We're just going to do some simple breathing. So you can keep your eyes open or closed. It's up to you. Whatever feels most comfortable for you. And we're going to just go ahead and begin by breathing in through our nose. So very slowly breathe in through your nose. And then we're going to filter that through exhaling slowly through the mouth. The next deep breath in, I want you to go ahead and count to 3. Hold for 3. And then we are going to exhale for 3. Let's do that again. Deep breath in through the nose for 3. Hold for 3. And we're exhaling for 3. And last time, deep breath in for 3. Hold for 3. And exhale for 3. Okay. So I want you to go ahead and re-rate your symptoms and just notice any minor changes, if any, and then what contributed to those. So breathing is one of the best ways to bring an individual to the moment, the present moment, and that's exactly what mindfulness is the here and now. So something simple as that breathing technique that you can use to get them an understanding, how to be in the moment and really focusing on that. We want them to create that awareness of their symptoms. So rating the symptoms before and after really helps them and assists them in seeing, what it looks like at different ratings and what tells them that it's a different rating. So a lot of times when I do that activity, something that they notice right away is how the body feels. So they might notice something like, okay, my shoulders are more relaxed. My heart's not beating so fast. My legs feel tingly. My arms feel like they're just like jello. I feel more grounded to the chair. Things like that will help you and help them understand that window of tolerance, but also create that understanding of what each symptom looks like and understand that difference. Phase 2 is resourcing. So we're going to move to resourcing. And resourcing is moving towards mastery. So this is where we're really building our coping skills. We're expanding our window of tolerance now. And we're making sure that we're looking at from judgment to non-judgment, helping them get to a non-judgment, and covert coping and skills. So I really want to focus on the judgment versus non-judgment because this is probably one of the difficult things to rewire the brain into moving from judgment to non-judgment, and something a lot of clients really struggle with. This is really important when we're going into coping, especially with individuals with chronic pain. When they get this sense of judgment versus non-judgment, they really get that sense of control back. A lot of people with chronic pain feel out of control, so we want them to really get that sense of control back for themselves. So one thing you can do for the chronic pain individuals is really helping them focus on areas of the pain, understanding that, maybe it's not everywhere in the body, but understanding that maybe it's only located in a certain area. Now, some people might say, I feel it everywhere, right? So areas like on our elbow, our nose, and our ears, we can get them to see that, there's a lot of times there's no pain in those, and our elbows feel almost nothing. So getting them to focus on those areas that, okay, it's not everywhere. In these areas, it's not, there's no pain in those areas. So we're really focusing and moving and shifting that mindset. And also with chronic pain individuals, instead of, a lot of times the thought is, I can't do anything. I feel this way, so that way I am this. Really helping them look at we are not our pain and not judging that. That is not us, but that it is what it is, right? Being present in the moment. Also a non-judgment versus judgment for those individuals that might be practicing any breathing or any meditation. sometimes a thought comes into the mind, and the individual really struggles with, I can't meditate. Something comes into my mind every time. Well, working towards non-judgment is noticing that without judgment and coming back to the practice. So that's a big DBT skill for those of you who have practiced DBT, but that really helps the individual notice it and let it go. So we're helping them move towards that too during this area. So we're going to go through a grounding technique that I like to use, and this is building some skills, and you can use it with your clients too, but it's just a very simple one. It starts with 3, 2, 1. So we're going to go through these. So if you like it, go ahead and use it. If not, you can alter it too, to however you want to implement it. But we're always looking at the 5 senses when we're trying to ground clients. And so I look at see, hear, and experience in this one. So if you want to try it, go ahead and relax. If you're in a chair or on your bed, wherever you're located, just kind of get comfortable in a comfortable position. And I want you to identify 3 things you see, 3 things you hear, and 3 things you're experiencing. So that could be internally, externally. Two things, so now we're going to 2. So we're going to identify 2 objects you see in the room. This could be 2 of the same or 2 different things. 2 noises, same or different. 2 body sensations, same or different. And then we move to 1 object, 1 noise, and 1 body sensation. And then, we're in the room, so that brings us present in the room, everything physically and emotionally that we're experiencing here and now in this room. So that's one technique you can use, and you can repeat that if you need to. If someone's really, really heightened, you might need to do that a couple times with them. But there's also a variety of different grounding techniques you can use. That's just one. The other one I really like is when you're using your 5 senses, 5 things you hear, 4 things you see, 3 things you smell, 2 things you taste, and 1 thing you physically feel. I like to use that one and do the physical feel rather than maybe the emotional feeling or the sensation, because if an individual is really heightened, that might make it worse. So use your best judgment, your clinical judgment on that. You might want to alter it so it's a physical feel rather than an internal one. Other skills that we can use for covert coping is developing a calm, safe place. And so that is a place that they feel calm and safe, of course. What I noticed when I help individuals identify a calm, safe place is if they identify a place that is a memory, somewhere they've been, almost always it turns negative. So I always ask individuals to create a place. If a place were to be calm and safe, we were creating a new place, what would that look like? And when we're doing that, we're having them identify every detail of that, and then giving it a name that only they know what it is, a name that feels safe for them, and this is their place. In EMDR, if those of you who are trained in EMDR, we do this and we add the bilateral stimulation to enhance that calm, safe place. But anyone can do this to identify a calm, safe place, even without EMDR, through just getting them to design that in their heads and really utilize that breathing. And once they have identified a calm, safe place, you can then really look at the strength of it by, having them also think about something that might be disturbing for them, that SUDS, which is system units of distress, might be a rating of maybe 3 or 4, where 10 is the most intense, and then bringing them back to the calm, safe place. So we're able to see, how strong that calm, safe place is for that individual, and they can go back and forth. Then they also get that sense of control too. It helps them feel empowered as well. So that's another skill you can utilize. Also, body scans are great to use in phase 2 of treatment with our individuals. And you can design a body scan yourself. There's lots that you can find online and read through those with your clients. So phase 3 is planning and developing. During this phase, we're really focusing on what we're going to be doing. So we're looking at, in phase 4, we're identifying what we're working on, but in phase 3, we are identifying those things that are positive, so a timeline that is a positive timeline for them. We're target planning, so taking inventory of things that have been a part of resilience. So we're kind of prepping them for phase 4 by identifying all the things that they have done good, that they are actually been able to get through in the past. So we're kind of strengthening that for them to move into this phase, which is phase 4, assessing and identifying. So in phase 4, we're getting a better sense of disturbing events that have shaped them. So this is where we're developing that negative timeline and identifying what they really wanting to work on. So they're giving you their coherent story here of what happened. What was that traumatic experience about? At this time, you might want to give that ACEs survey if you didn't already have done that in the beginning. But you also want to make sure before we go into phase 4 that an individual is ready for this too. So a dissociation scale, which is a DES scale that you can find online too, will give you a really good sense of how much they're dissociating. If they're dissociating still, we still have to do a lot more grounding techniques and coping before we move into phase 4. And so that's very, very important. But in phase 4, when the client is ready, we're identifying those core negative beliefs by hearing, what had happened when we're reprocessing that, or when we're starting to talk about that trauma. So we're looking at what symptoms come with that, and then the core negative belief systems that go with that. And then phase 5 is the treatment section. So that's once we have, our background of, the traumatic experience or whatever the event may have been, we have identified, hopefully, what treatment model we're going to use that's going to be best for this individual. So some people like top versus bottom interventions. So, utilizing both is probably the best thing to do. But we know that sometimes bottom interventions with then mixture with the top interventions work, because bottom interventions really work on the parasympathetic nervous system. So anyone who knows the polyvagal approach or polyvagal theory really helps in calming the system. We know breathing is the only automatic nervous system that we have control over. So you might want to use that one, or titration and pendulation. So that is kind of going back and forth from traumatic experience to coping, traumatic experience to coping. So getting a little bit at a time. Or you might do the EMDR approach. You might do some desensitization, maybe some CBT, trauma-informed CBT, or the DBT too. But whatever you do, this is phase 5 of treatment. So we got to remember our clients are, ready, and it's appropriate for them to go into this phase, especially dealing with trauma. The worst thing we could do is go into this if a client is not ready. So we really want to prep them, assess, and make sure that they're ready for this part of treatment. And that concludes our Adverse Childhood Experiences seminar today. Hope you learned something new. And if you have any questions after this, you can go ahead and email me at that email, melitta.basa@gmail, and I will certainly get back to you. Here's our resources list. Go through those, and I'll start answering Q&As.
If you have any questions, this is a good time. We have a couple minutes that we can answer those before we close. So we've had a lot of response regarding the presentation and the PowerPoint today and the link. And typically we post it on our website about 30 days after the presentation, but I'm going to work really hard to try to get it posted early for you. So if you want to make a note to check our website next Friday, I will try to have the recording, the presentation, and the links up for you.
Okay, so someone had asked, I see over here, is sharing ACEs questionnaire a powerful tool for clients' empowerment and learning how core beliefs that come into play? Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember when I did this class for the clients that we have, a client actually came up to me and said, wow, I now understand my whole life and why I think the way that I do. So absolutely. Still going through these. Okay.
Melitta, if you can back up the slide and show your email address. I think a couple people were interested in jotting that down.
All right, we have a question on how to receive the CEUs and the certificate.
Yes, if you, once the presentation's over, I'll conclude with some slides that give you direction on how to get your CEUs and how to access our website.
Okay, and someone asked if there's more intensive course / degree specialization that I'm aware of for more training. So that would be any trauma trainings. So, you know, EMDR is one, CCTP is one. I know there's some trauma-informed CBT certifications you can get. So anything trauma-related would be more intense course that you'll get a certificate or credential for that. And how did I end up in this field? Well, that's a great question. So in fourth grade, it was actually in fourth grade, my parents had divorced, and I had a therapist who really helped me and helped me understand, you know, that it's not your fault, you know, the basics. And I really thank that individual, that therapist, for what they did for me. And so in fourth grade, I told my parents that this is what I want to do. This person really helped me. And I really stuck with that. And as I got into the field further and further, I really grew a love for trauma. I was working with children in Florida, South Florida, community partners. I don't know if it's still there or not because I'm in Texas now, but I really grew a love for all the girls I was working with. And I noticed that so many of them had significant trauma. And what I found was interesting is because I was a mobile therapist, I would go into either the homes or schools. Some of them were in foster care, some of them were with their families still. But I would really try to get the parents engaged, and that was probably the hardest part, is getting the families engaged because, you know, they say, you know, this is our daughter or son, and they need the help, not me. But that's really what I try to work towards, is getting the families involved. And family systems and family therapy is so important. But sometimes, again, if, you know, it's their child who is the one seeking treatment, they don't really identify as having a problem, which could be a difficult thing to do or to get them to understand.
We're going to have to wrap up. Well, Melitta, we really appreciate your presentation. You've had a lot of great, relevant information for us, and we do appreciate your time. And if you could please hold for the conclusion to go over our CEUs. When I conclude today's webinar, your browser will take you to an evaluation on FADA's new website. If you want to receive CE credits or a statement of credit for this event, please complete the evaluation. You'll be prompted to register or sign in to complete the evaluation. You can register as a visitor at no cost. For CEs to be reported to CE Broker for Florida licensed healthcare practitioners, you must provide an accurate Florida Department of Health license prefix and number for the first time that you register. After you register or sign in, you will be directed onward to the evaluation. You may consider using the same email address when you register for webinars through our WebEx link and when you set up your profile in FADA's system. This helps connect your attendance and your profile. You will get a second opportunity to complete the evaluation through a follow-up email later today in about 30 minutes. The sender will be messenger@webex. The evaluation will close at midnight on Tuesday, March the 10th. We do not email statements of credit. Instead, after we verify attendance and the completion of the evaluation, a statement of credit will be generated as a journal entry within your profile. And we want to thank you for participating in today's webinar. We'd also like to recognize and thank especially the Florida Department of Children and Families Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health for funding today's education. Have a great rest of your day, and please hold for the evaluation. Thank you, Melitta.
Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. Like I said, any other questions, go ahead and email me, and I'll get back to you. Thank you.